NDTV exclusive, ladies and gentlemen, where the recent satellite imagery, which has been accessed by my colleague Vishnu Shom, shows that Pakistan Air Force efforts to repair and restore a key command and control center at its premier Murid Air Base near Chakwal has absolutely failed. A February 28 satellite image sourced by NDTV suggests repair work at the key Murid Air Base has been unsuccessful. The central area of the building, which was struck and subsequently covered, has been, the Pakistanis have not been able to repair that. Let me very quickly at this moment go across to Vishnu Shom, who is bringing us this, big exclusive at this moment. Vishnu, take it away.
All right, well, what you just saw on your screen very briefly was another part of Murid Air Base. But what I'd like to talk to you first is where Murid Air Base is. It's about 94, 96 kilometers away from the line of control between India and Pakistan. That's the Murid Air Base you can see underneath. That was what was struck very heavily between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. on the 10th of May last year when Sindoor was coming to a close. In fact, just a few hours after this strike, and I'm going to bring up the images, is when Pakistan came to the ceasefire table. Let's bring you the first image. Now, there were a couple of strikes. Now, first up, this is an image of the 10th of May. So let's go to that next image, if we can, please. Right, and let's stay on it for a moment. This is that image on the 10th of May. This is a particular building that we should focus on. There is roof damage that you can see, likely damage as well, but the points of impact seem to be very small. So if I come closer over here and point out, these appear to be very small impacts. So is there anything to suggest that this entire building would collapse? If you take a look at that, perhaps you'd say that no, it doesn't seem to be very much. But let's go to the next image. And the next image is what this story is all about. This is an image from the 28th of February 2026. That is green and red tarpaulin on top of the remains of that building, and that building itself has been completely demolished. The fact that we have this indicates that Pakistan were unable to construct or reconstruct this important command and control center in Murid. Let's go to the next picture if we can. And this actually is something that we've broken every single story on. It's an NDTV exclusive. So let's focus first on what that building, this command and control center, used to look like, all right? So that's the first one before the strikes took place. Then the one on the 10th of May 2025, where you can see the strikes, and I explained to you what exactly those strikes indicated, right? So that's when the strikes took place. On the 2nd of June 2025, there is a green colored tarpaulin over a part of that building. They were obviously trying to repair this facility, which, as I said, is a command and control center for UAV operations. After that, on the 16th of December, we noticed that they'd put this bright red-orange tarpaulin covering the entire building with that green tarpaulin in the middle over here. So there was a sense that they were involved in very heavy activity over here to try and fix this site, which was struck by the Indian Air Force. But this image that I've now sourced indicates that the entire building is destroyed. It no longer exists. And this is just the remnants of tarpaulin over here. They're going to have to rebuild this. Now, this isn't the first such area where Pakistan has failed to reconstruct a building which was struck by the Indian Air Force. We've also been tracking other buildings which were struck and hangars. So let's go to the next image. And this actually shows Bholari. Bholari is another airbase of the Pakistanis, much further south of this. The first image of the 27th of April, what it used to look like, this is an image of the 11th of May, one day after the strikes, where there was that gigantic hole where an AWACS aircraft of the Pakistanis was in fact knocked out as far as the Indian Air Force is concerned. On the 2nd of June, we found that they were trying to do some repairs. So there were these green patches over here. But then a new image, which I accessed a few days back, a couple of months back, in fact, shows that they're peeling off the roof completely, and it's likely that this entire structure has to be built up from the scratch, which indicates the depth of the IAF's attacks. Let's go to another one. The next picture is this is of the Noor Khan Air Base, very close to the Pakistan center. Another control and command center. These were in fact trucks over there which were destroyed. Underneath the structure, there is an expectation that there was an underground structure. The site was destroyed, right? The site was cleared. Reconstruction activity began. The building structures emerged. And yet again, in a place which the Indian Air Force struck, there are new buildings which have emerged. And so again, this again proves the extent of the Indian Air Force's strikes in these areas. All of these sites were completely destroyed. And by tracking this over a period of several months, almost a year, we've been able to establish the depth of the Indian Air Force's strikes. I think there's one more image which we have with us. This is Sukkur. This is on the 10th of May, 2025. This is believed to have been a UAV hangar as well. It was absolutely demolished during the Indian Air Force's strikes. And then if you go to another image, this was an image of the 27th of November, which we subsequently accessed. This has completely been leveled. So again, the point in doing these stories is this. The point is that the Pakistani Air Force was very, very badly hit in the early hours of the 10th of May last year. Within a few hours of that, they came to the ceasefire table. And the fact that these aren't small hits, all of these buildings have had to be rebuilt, gives you an idea of the extent of the Indian Air Force's strikes.
Vishnu, before I let you go, let me ask you this. This also, as you rightly pointed out, shows the destruction, the devastation that took place and the precision with which the Indian Air Force was able to conduct its strike that brought Pakistan on its knees and then, of course, to the negotiating table asking for a ceasefire.
That's exactly right. And I've written about this in my book as well, which will be out in just the next couple of days. But by the 10th morning, and I'm talking about the 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. on the 10th, and then after a few hours, when there were more strikes which went in, the Indian Air Force was entirely on the ascendancy. And this isn't narrative building which has been done by the Indian Air Force or the government. Each one of those strikes is something that we've been able to corroborate using Maxar satellite imagery. Maxar is now called Vantor. Not only did we identify the strikes at that stage, but we identified the process of attempts to rebuild each of these hangars or buildings, which eventually failed. And I've showed you images of 4 bases over here. But remember, on the 10th of May 2025, the Indian Air Force struck more than 10 Pakistani air bases and air defense sites.
Vishnu, just one more question as far as these images that you have been able to access. I mean, as we have been discussing, it tells you about the extent of the damage. Does it also, in a way, give you a sense of the kind of weaponry that was used by the Indian Air Force? I mean, in most of these places, as you pointed out, they have to build it ground up. Everything that was there before has to be completely cleared out.
Now, Ankit, I could tell you, but then I'd need to shoot you. Because the Indian Air Force is very quiet, as are all air forces, about the choice of weapon for the targets which they have hit. So they would not tell me what exactly they used, but I know the specifications of every weapon system. And the primary weapons being used by the Indian Air Force was an Israeli weapon called the Rampage, a missile called the Scalp, which is a French weapon used on the Rafale aircraft. There was the indigenous BrahMos as well. There was the Israeli Crystal Maze, which was also used. Also the Hammer, which is French, and the Spice 2000, which is a kit, which is Israeli. So all of these weapons, some of these had what are called penetrator warheads. And this particular building, the one that you actually see on the screen, was likely struck by a penetrator, which went into the roof. It didn't detonate. It went deep down. Then it detonated and caused the massive destruction which we've described.